The courtroom was buzzing with tension. People whispered, papers shuffled, and the soft clicking of heels echoed against the marble floors. Outside, a crowd had gathered, reporters craning their necks for a glimpse of the woman at the center of it all, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Inside, she sat calmly, her hands folded, eyes locked straight ahead like a laser. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. And that's what unnerved everyone in the room, especially Judge Harlan Dorsey. He was known as the Gavel, not just for his relentless courtroom discipline, but for his record of silencing dissent. No one challenged him without consequences. People feared the cold precision of his rulings, his sharp tongue, and the smirk he wore when doling out punishment. But today was different. Jasmine wasn't in the courtroom as a politician. She wasn't testifying. She wasn't on trial. She had been summoned, no targeted. Judge Dorsey claimed she had obstructed the dignity of the court during a public statement she made 2 weeks prior. A statement where she called out what she described as a deeply embedded system of legal intimidation used against black lawmakers who spoke too boldly. And now, he was making an example out of her. The clerk read out the motion. A $15,000 fine. Immediate payment required. No negotiation. The courtroom gasped. Jasmine didn't. Judge Dorsey adjusted his glasses, leaned slightly forward, and smiled the kind of smile that was less warmth and more warning. "Do you understand the penalty being levied against you, Miss Crockett?" he asked, emphasizing Miss like it was an insult. "I do," she said. Her voice was soft but carried weight, the kind of tone that quieted rooms and turned heads. "Then you'll submit payment by end of day. Failure to comply will not be a concern," Jasmine interrupted. The pause that followed was thick. Every eye swung between the judge and Jasmine like a tennis match on the edge of madness. Judge Dorsey leaned back in his chair. "You seem confident." "I am." "And yet you're not denying the charges?" Jasmine's lips curled slightly. "Oh, I'll address the charges. But I need a moment, Your Honor. I have something to submit before we continue." The judge raised an eyebrow. "This is highly irregular." "Nothing about this is regular, Your Honor. But let's play by the rules, your rules." That last line hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. The judge motioned. "Proceed." Jasmine opened her bag and pulled out a stack of documents, neatly bound, each page marked, numbered, and highlighted. She handed them to the bailiff. "This is my submission. I trust the court will review it with the same speed and interest it reviewed my alleged violation." The documents made their way to the judge's bench. He skimmed the first few pages. His fingers paused. His face tightened. And then it happened. The room changed. The energy that had once favored the judge began to drift, shift, tip. People leaned forward. Even the court reporter hesitated, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. The silence was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was loaded. "What exactly am I looking at?" the judge asked, though he already knew. "Financial disclosures," Jasmine replied. "Yours." "No, yours." His hand froze. "I took the liberty," she continued, "of having my legal team review a few things. I wanted to understand why a sitting judge, who has never issued a fine exceeding $500 in the past 5 years, suddenly felt the need to impose a $15,000 penalty on me for a public statement protected under the First Amendment." Murmurs broke out again. One man in the gallery actually dropped his coffee. The judge tapped his gavel. "Order." Jasmine took a step closer to the front of the courtroom. She was in full command now, voice steady, words deliberate. "Those documents show a pattern," she said. "A pattern of targeted judicial behavior. But more than that, they reveal a financial trail. Contributions, private dinners, undisclosed gifts, from one particular firm that recently lost a case in this courtroom. A case where the losing side had publicly thanked me for helping expose their opposition's corruption." Judge Dorsey's face went pale. "I believe, Your Honor, that what we have here is not an issue of contempt, but retaliation." Gasps again. Louder now. The judge's hand trembled slightly as he set the papers down. "These documents are inadmissible without verification. And they'll get verified. I've already submitted them to the State Judicial Oversight Committee. They'll be arriving any minute. The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened. 2 men and a woman entered, suits crisp, badges visible. The woman nodded at Jasmine and then at the judge. That's when Judge Dorsey's gavel came down again. Hard. We'll recess. No, Jasmine said firmly. We won't. The judge's head snapped up. With all due respect, Your Honor, she continued, you summoned me here under false pretenses. You used your power to intimidate, not to administer justice. And I will not allow this moment to vanish quietly into another file drawer marked forgotten. Miss Crockett, Congresswoman. That correction landed like a thunderclap. Congresswoman Crockett, she continued, this courtroom doesn't belong to you. But it doesn't belong to me either. It belongs to the people. And they're watching. Everyone could feel it now. The judge was cornered. Trapped not by words, but by the truth. He glanced down at the documents again, as though hoping the pages might suddenly burst into flames and save him. No such luck. Outside, cameras flashed through the window. The crowd had grown. Reporters were live-streaming from their phones. It was no longer a trial. It was a reckoning. And Jasmine? She was just getting started. I'm prepared to submit video evidence, witness testimony, and call for an immediate inquiry, she said. Unless you prefer to expedite your resignation and save yourself the public embarrassment. The judge opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the judicial officials who had just entered. They weren't blinking. They weren't smiling either. Jasmine took another step forward, lowering her voice so only those closest could hear. You tried to fine me $15,000 to silence me. But what you failed to understand is you lit a fuse. And I'm the flame. A long silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, the judge stood. I will review the documents and suspend the fine until further notice, he said, voice tight, robotic. But Jasmine wasn't finished. Oh no, Judge. That's not enough. I want a public acknowledgement that this proceeding was invalid. That your actions were inappropriate. And I want it today. You're out of line, he snapped. No. I'm in the center of it. And you're on the edge. And just then, the woman from the Oversight Committee stepped forward. Your Honor, she said calmly, we'd like to speak with you in chambers. Now. The judge hesitated, then left the bench without a word. As the doors closed behind him, the courtroom remained frozen. Then, slowly, applause broke out. Jasmine didn't smile. She turned to her assistant, whispered something, and exited through the side door, avoiding the cameras. Because, while everyone thought the story ended here, Jasmine knew better. This wasn't the end. This was just chapter 1. Because the documents she had submitted, they weren't everything. They were just enough. Enough to push the first domino. She had something else. Something no one in that courtroom had seen yet. Something explosive. She made her way down the hall, where a man in a black suit was waiting. He handed her a flash drive. Is this all of it? She asked. Every file. Every conversation. Even the deleted ones. Good, she said. Let's see how deep this goes. Because Jasmine Crockett hadn't just defended herself in that courtroom. She had declared war. And she had no intention of losing. Not now. Not ever. The flash drive was warm in her hand, like it had been waiting to be used. Jasmine Crockett didn't pause. Didn't second guess. She tucked it securely into the inner pocket of her blazer, nodded to the man in the black suit, and kept walking. Her heels struck the courthouse floor with quiet force, echoing down the corridor like war drums. Every step was deliberate, every breath steady. She was calm, but her mind was sprinting, because now things were about to spiral. The flash drive held the unfiltered truth, audio files, email exchanges, encrypted transfers routed through obscure legal consultancies, all pointing to a network that didn't just involve Judge Harlan Dorsey, but possibly 4 other sitting judges, 2 state senators, and a handful of corporate executives with more power than most governors. What Jasmine had brought into the courtroom earlier had been a spark. But this was the explosion. And she had to decide carefully how to use it and when to pull the trigger. Outside the courthouse, the press mob was waiting, cameras pointed like rifles, lights blazing like stage lamps. Jasmine didn't flinch. She slipped on her sunglasses, ignored the shouted questions, and stepped into the back seat of a black SUV. Her assistant, Maya, was already inside, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Encrypted backup complete," Maya said. "I've also uploaded the files to a cold server in Iceland. Nobody's deleting anything." "Good," Jasmine replied, finally exhaling. "Because if they knew what we had, they'd burn down the city to bury it." The SUV pulled away from the courthouse, and Jasmine leaned back, her mind jumping ahead. The headlines tomorrow would be brutal. The court drama, the confrontation with the judge, the surprise documents, it would all trend. Social media would erupt. But what no one understood, not yet, was that the drama they witnessed in the courtroom was a shadow of something much larger. Judge Dorsey wasn't the storm. He was the broken umbrella in it. As the city blurred past the window, Jasmine remembered a conversation she'd had with a mentor years ago. A grizzled old civil rights lawyer, the kind who'd once faced down fire hoses and snarling dogs, had told her something that stuck. "They don't fear you when you shout," he said. "They fear you when you know." She knew. She knew what Dorsey had done, but she also knew why he'd done it. The fine wasn't about courtroom decorum. It was a desperate play by a frightened man. Because someone had called in a favor. Someone had whispered that Jasmine was getting too close, that she was digging in places too dark and too old to be disturbed. And Dorsey? He did what cowards always do when they're scared. He lashed out. But now, the leash had snapped. Jasmine's phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from an anonymous source, known only by the codename Indigo. She'd first heard from them 6 weeks ago, after making a public request for whistleblowers to come forward regarding judicial misconduct. Indigo had sent vague clues, little breadcrumbs. But what was on that flash drive? That had come from them. And now, the message was just 4 words. "They're watching. Stay ready." Maya glanced over Jasmine's shoulder. "Indigo again?" She nodded. "Yeah. I think they're warning us. Think they know who we're dealing with. I think they know more than we do." Maya bit her lip, then pulled up a folder on her laptop. "I did some digging while you were in the courtroom. One of the names from the emails, Alton Greaves, CEO of Stratton Capital. On paper, he's squeaky clean. But guess what he owns through shell companies?" "Let me guess," Jasmine said. "The law firm Dorsey used to work for?" "Bingo. Not only that, he's been making campaign donations to a PAC that's been targeting progressive black lawmakers for the last 3 election cycles. Quiet money, spread out, but traceable." Jasmine's pulse ticked up. So he's the spider in the web. More like the hand in the puppet. The SUV turned sharply. They were heading out of the city now, toward the safe house, an old retreat center tucked in the woods outside Dallas, fortified with digital surveillance jammers and off-the-grid power. Jasmine had used it before, during tense negotiations for police reform. But this felt different. This wasn't about policy. It wasn't even about justice. This was about survival. Because if Stratton Capital, corrupt judges, and political hitmen were working together to protect their empire, then Jasmine had just declared herself their public enemy number 1. She didn't mind. But she knew they would mind. And they would come. That night, under the hum of a dim generator and flickering LED lights, Jasmine and Maya sat cross-legged on the floor of the safe house, surrounded by files, audio recordings, burner phones, and a corkboard that looked like it belonged to a detective in a thriller movie. Red strings connected names, cities, companies. In the center was a photo of Judge Dorsey, with a bold line stretching to Alton Greaves. "What if this is just the surface?" Maya asked. "It is," Jasmine replied. "The question is how deep the iceberg goes before it hits the keel." They worked in silence for hours, cross-referencing names, dates, matching audio recordings to timestamps in the emails. Then they found it. A buried message in the metadata of a voicemail sent to Dorsey by an unknown number. It was scratchy, distorted, like it had been filtered through several layers of obfuscation. But the voice was clear enough. "She's not just noise. She's a threat. Shut her up. Make it look procedural." Jasmine sat back, heart pounding. That wasn't a casual threat. That was a directive. A kill order. Not literally, but reputationally. And Dorsey had obeyed. He tried to do it with a fine. Tried to use the courtroom to humiliate her. To label her as disruptive, disrespectful. Tried to drag her name through the mud so that when the Real bomb dropped, no one would believe her. But now she had the bomb. And she was going to drop it on her terms. The next morning, she recorded a video. Not a press conference. Not a statement through her office. A raw direct-to-camera video recorded at dawn. Wind rustling in the background. Sunlight catching her face just enough to make her look defiant, not dramatic. They tried to silence me, she began. But what they didn't count on was that I wasn't speaking for myself. I was speaking for every person who's ever been buried under corruption, misled by justice, betrayed by power. She spoke for 12 minutes straight. Every fact she had. Every name. Every pattern. She held up the flash drive. "This is only the beginning," she said. "And if anything happens to me, this gets released everywhere. You don't get to erase the truth just because you're scared of what it reveals." Then she uploaded it. Not to one platform. To 10. And she emailed it to journalists, civil rights organizations, trusted members of Congress, and most importantly, Indigo. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask for protection. She forced the war into the light. Within 2 hours, the story went viral. News outlets scrambled to verify the claims. Hashtags exploded. Dorsey was put on administrative leave. Stratwin Capital released a sterile statement of denial. And Alton Greaves? He disappeared. His assistant said he was traveling. No further comment. But Jasmine didn't stop there. She began contacting former court clerks, law students, bailiffs, anyone who had witnessed behavior from the bench that didn't sit right. The testimonials started rolling in, anonymous at first. But then brave faces began attaching names to stories. A woman who had been fired for questioning a judge's connection to a real estate developer. A former prosecutor who said he was forced to drop charges in cases where donors were involved. The pattern was undeniable. And now the public was watching. Jasmine was invited to testify before the State Judiciary Committee. But she declined, for now. She wanted more time. She wanted airtight evidence. She wanted the truth so heavy, so undeniable, that not even the most well-paid lawyer could spin it into something else. Late that night, as she stood outside the safe house under the stars, Maya brought her a phone. "It's Indigo." Jasmine took it, voice calm. "I didn't expect to hear from you again." "I saw the video," Indigo said. The voice was masked, genderless. "You made your move. It was time." A pause. "There's something you need to see," Indigo said. "The Dorsey files? They're just one branch. There's a root system beneath all of this. I've traced it back 15 years. Interstate deals, judicial appointments, a silent council of donors who decide which judges sit where and who pays for them to stay silent." Jasmine's heart slowed. "You have proof. I'll send you coordinates. But be careful. They know you've seen the first layer. They'll be more aggressive now." Jasmine closed her eyes, felt the weight of what was coming. But she didn't feel fear. She felt clarity. "Let them come," she said. "They've built their kingdom on fear. I'll bring it down with the truth." And as she hung up, the wind picked up around her, trees whispering secrets that had waited years to be spoken. Somewhere in the dark, power stirred. But Jasmine Crockett was ready, because she wasn't just in the fight anymore. She was leading it. And the next chapter would burn the whole system down. The next morning felt quieter than it should have. Too quiet. Not in the peaceful, meditative way, but the kind of quiet that usually comes before something catastrophic. Jasmine Crockett woke with that tension in her chest, the kind that alerts you before your conscious mind catches up. She had barely managed a few hours of sleep, drifting off only after replaying Indigo's words 100 times in her head. Now, the sun filtered through the window like an unwanted guest, and the silence around her seemed loaded, like a held breath waiting to break. She stepped outside, phone clutched tightly, waiting for the promised message from Indigo. Coordinates, they'd said. Something big, something that reached deeper than Dorsey, deeper than Stratwin Capital. A network so sprawling and interconnected that it would take more than a flash drive and a viral video to dismantle it. But Jasmine was ready. More than ready. She had passed the point of no return. The moment she uploaded that video and named names on record, she knew she had chosen war. And in this war, her armor was truth, and her weapon was exposure. The encrypted message came in at 9:06 a.m. No text, just a set of coordinates. Somewhere in the outskirts of Amarillo, Texas. Desert country. Dry, desolate, and far from media attention. She showed it to Maya, who instantly pulled it up on her tablet. What they found was unsettling. The location pinpointed an abandoned courthouse, shut down 15 years ago after a fire destroyed half the records room. But that wasn't what caught their attention. What mattered was what surrounded the courthouse. No neighbors. No surveillance. And yet, satellite images from the past few years showed faint signs of activity. Vehicles that didn't belong to the local registry. Deliveries at odd hours, thermal signatures at night. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. They've been using it. For what? Maya asked. That's what we're going to find out. 3 hours later, they were on the road. Jasmine didn't trust planes anymore. Too easy to track, too vulnerable to sabotage. They used a nondescript rental, switching plates twice along the way. Maya handled comms, encrypting all messages through 3 layers of VPNs and private networks. The closer they got to Amarillo, the more the air thickened, not with weather, but with weight. Jasmine could feel it in her bones. Something was coming, and it wasn't going to be simple or safe. By the time they reached the courthouse, the sun was dipping behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. The building looked as forgotten as it had in the photos, weathered bricks, boarded-up windows, graffiti from years of neglect. But up close, it was different. The boards had been removed recently. Fresh tire tracks zigzagged across the parking lot. Jasmine signaled to Maya to stay close, and together, they moved quietly toward the back entrance. It was unlocked. That alone told Jasmine everything she needed to know. This place wasn't abandoned. It was a front, hidden in plain sight. And whoever ran, it thought they were too far removed from suspicion to bother locking the doors. They stepped inside. The air smelled of mildew and dust and something else. Chemicals. Sterile, clinical. Like a lab, but off. The floor creaked under their feet. Jasmine's flashlight danced across mold-streaked walls and rusted furniture until they found the staircase that led down. She hesitated, then descended. The basement was cold. Too cold. Maya shivered behind her, but said nothing. They moved past rows of empty filing cabinets toward what looked like a sealed door with a keypad. Jasmine examined it. The panel had recently been cleaned. No dust, no grime. This door had been used. Frequently. I can hack it, Maya said, kneeling and pulling out a small device. Jasmine kept watch, flashlight sweeping back and forth, hard hammering. Every second down there felt like a risk. But they had come this far. There was no turning back now. With a soft beep, the keypad flashed green. The door creaked open. Behind it was not what they expected. Rows of server racks blinked in the darkness. Cold air pumped from vents overhead. Jasmine stepped in slowly, absorbing the gravity of what they were looking at. Data. All of it. Every file that had vanished from public records. Every case scrubbed clean. Every bribe, every falsified judgment, every manipulated docket, preserved, cataloged, and stored in digital silence. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was an archive. They were keeping records, Maya whispered. Why would they? For leverage, Jasmine answered. Control. Insurance. You collect enough dirt on enough powerful people, and suddenly you're untouchable. They moved through the room like archaeologists in a tomb, reading labels on the servers. One caught Jasmine's eye. It was marked with a date, 2009, and a name, Rosalind Hale. Jasmine froze. That name wasn't random. Rosalind Hale was a young public defender who had vanished without explanation during a high-profile case against a wealthy developer tied to the judiciary. The official story was that she had a breakdown. But whispers had always said different. That she had discovered something and paid the price for it. Jasmine pulled up the file. Inside were recordings, private conversations between Hale and her client, encrypted communications with an anonymous source, and a folder marked, "To be released if anything happens to me." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a document detailing a network of judges being rotated through specific counties based on proximity to high-dollar civil suits. The arrangement ensured favorable outcomes for certain clients, usually ones tied to Stratwin Capital or its sister firms. Judge Dorsey was listed. So were others, some still on the bench today. There were bank transfers, hidden real estate deals, even photos of secret meetings. Rosalind had found everything, and they had silenced her. But not completely, because now Jasmine had her voice. The ground shook. It was subtle, barely more than a tremor, but enough to knock dust loose from the ceiling. Jasmine's head snapped up. "They're here," Maya said. "They must have followed us." Jasmine yanked the drive from the server and shoved it into her bag. "We need to get out. Now." They retraced their steps, moving faster, but not recklessly. The building creaked ominously, as if protesting their escape. As they neared the stairwell, voices echoed from above. Men, armed, unmistakably military in tone. Jasmine pressed her back to the wall, signaling Maya to stay quiet. The footsteps got louder, then paused. She heard one of them speak. "Indigo said they'd be here. Search every floor. And if you see her, neutralize her." Jasmine's blood ran cold. Indigo? Had she been betrayed? Or was this a trap set by someone pretending to be Indigo? Either way, they couldn't stay. She motioned for Maya to follow, then darted toward a side exit marked maintenance. The door opened into a narrow hallway that reeked of mold and engine oil. At the far end was a grate. She pried it loose with her bare hands, cutting her palm, but barely feeling it through the adrenaline. Maya crawled through first. Jasmine followed. They emerged in a drainage ditch behind the courthouse. Muddy, wet, but alive. They sprinted toward the car. It was only once they were safely inside and driving away that Jasmine finally allowed herself to speak. "They knew we'd be there." Maya stared at her, eyes wide. "How? You only told me and Indigo." Jasmine didn't answer. She was thinking too fast, thoughts colliding. It wasn't possible. Indigo had been helping her all along. They'd given her the flash drive, warned her of threats, told her where to go. Unless Indigo wasn't one person. Unless Indigo was two people. One helping, and one hunting. They didn't go back to the safe house. It wasn't safe anymore. Instead, they drove through the night, ending up in an old motel off a forgotten highway. Jasmine uploaded the files from Rosalind Hale's folder to a fresh backup, then started crafting a second-wave video. But this one would be different. It wouldn't name names. It would show them. Leaked audio, surveillance photos, documents. A slow burn of exposure that couldn't be denied. But she needed to be careful. Because now, they weren't just trying to silence her. They were trying to erase her. And they were close. That night, as Maya slept, Jasmine sat on the bed with her phone in hand. She debated texting Indigo, demanding answers. But something told her not to. Instead, she made a list of every person she could still trust. It was a short list. A dangerously short list. But she didn't need many. She just needed one thing. Time. And time was the one thing they were running out of. The next morning, a message buzzed through on her encrypted phone. It was a video. No sender. No subject line. She opened it. The screen showed a man in a dark room. His face bruised, his eyes swollen. He was strapped to a chair. And, in a hoarse voice, he said, "My name is Devin Lockhart. I used to work for Stratwin. If you're watching this, they found me. I gave everything to Indigo. All of it. But there are two of them. One's still helping. The other works for them. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't stop digging." The video cut to black. Jasmine sat frozen. Devin Lockhart had been declared dead 4 years ago. Officially a suicide. But now, like Rosalind, he was speaking from beyond the grave. And Jasmine knew. The fight was far from over. The motel room was dim, lit only by the flickering blue of the old CRT television in the corner that no one was watching. Jasmine sat at the edge of the bed, her elbows on her knees, phone clenched in one hand like a weapon. Devin Lockhart's face still burned in her memory, bloodied, exhausted, but full of defiance. A ghost brought back to life, delivering one final warning from the edge of death. His message changed everything. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was real. There were two Indigos, two players on opposite ends of the same board. And Jasmine, whether she liked it or not, was now the queen being hunted. Maya stirred under the blanket, groaning softly, her body twisted uncomfortably in the stiff motel bed. Jasmine looked at her and wondered how much longer they could go on like this, moving from place to place, running, watching their backs. They were two women up against a system older, colder, and far more dangerous than anything they'd imagined at the beginning. And yet, Jasmine's fire hadn't dimmed. If anything, it burned hotter now, fueled by each new betrayal. Each lie peeled away to reveal the rot beneath. She stared at her laptop screen. The files from the courthouse were organized now, indexed, and mirrored on 3 secure servers spread across the globe. One in Reykjavik, another in Johannesburg, the third buried behind military-grade encryption in an anonymous node somewhere off the coast of Japan. She had created a dead man's switch. If anything happened to her, the files would go live, flooding media inboxes, whistleblower platforms, public forums. It would be impossible to contain. But Jasmine wasn't interested in simply exposing them anymore. She wanted to collapse them. She wanted the whole network to choke on its own secrets, to unravel until even the ones at the top had nowhere left to hide. And for that, she needed something more than evidence. She needed the source, the heart of the beast. That's when she remembered something from Devin's file. A small reference tucked into a larger communication between Stratwin executives. A code phrase used again and again in financial ledgers and internal memos. Project Delphi. At first glance, it looked like just another shell company or program codename. But Devin had tagged it as high priority. Jasmine pulled up the cross-reference. Delphi wasn't a program. It was a location. Buried in the Mojave Desert. A research compound. Privately owned. No address. No government registration. The kind of place where people disappeared without anyone asking why. She zoomed in on the satellite image. The building was rectangular, covered in a roof that shimmered with solar panels. A perimeter fence wrapped around it like a noose. And inside, she could only guess. The files didn't say what Delphi did, only that it was the last stop for classified subjects. People like Rosalind Hale, like Devin, maybe even others. Jasmine knew what she had to do. They had to go there. By the time Maya woke up, Jasmine had already mapped out the route and packed their things. When she told her, Maya's face went pale, but she didn't argue. They were past the point of arguing. There was no safe option anymore. Only bold ones. And they were either going to end this or be buried trying. The road to the Mojave stretched like a wound, slicing through endless fields of dust and broken towns. The radio was silent. Neither of them spoke much. Jasmine was locked in thought, running through every scenario, every possible outcome. What would they find at Delphi? Would there be anyone left? Would it even be real? Or was it a trap waiting for them to walk right into it? They stopped only for gas and supplies, making sure they were off-grid the entire time. Maya rerouted their devices through burner networks, masking their digital trail. Still, Jasmine felt eyes on them everywhere. Paranoia or instinct, she didn't know anymore. But she trusted it. She had to. 3 days later, they arrived. Delphi was just as the satellite image had shown, gray, lifeless, sprawling across the sand like a concrete serpent. The fence was electrified. Cameras on every corner. No visible guards. That was what made it worse. Because Jasmine knew it was occupied. She could feel it. They waited until nightfall. Then, dressed in black, they made their approach. Maya disabled the fence's current, while Jasmine used a glass cutter to slice through the window of a rear maintenance room. They slipped inside like ghosts. The air was sterile and cold. The walls were too clean, too perfect, like the place had never been touched by real life. They passed empty offices, labs filled with dormant computers, and long corridors that echoed with every footstep. Then they found it. An elevator. No buttons. Only a biometric scanner. Jasmine stared at it, rage flaring inside her. So close, and now stopped by a piece of tech she couldn't fake. She looked at Maya, who was already pulling tools from her bag. The girl had been preparing for this moment without even saying it out loud. 10 minutes later, the scanner beeped. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. The descent felt eternal. The lights flickered. The hum of machinery filled the silence. And then it stopped. The doors opened to darkness. Not empty darkness. Heavy darkness. A long hallway stretched before them. Along the sides, thick glass chambers lined the walls, each one filled with a dull blue light. And inside each chamber, people. Alive. Asleep. Connected to machines through wires and tubes. Their chests rose and fell slowly, mechanically, like they were breathing borrowed air. Jasmine's stomach dropped. These weren't prisoners. They were test subjects. Experiments. Some of them wore judicial robes. Others, corporate suits. But many, too many, were just regular people. Whistleblowers. Journalists. Activists. Faces she'd seen in headlines that had abruptly gone silent. People declared missing, presumed dead. They were all here. Preserved. Used. A screen blinked on above the hallway. A face appeared. It was Dorsey. Smiling. "Hello, Jasmine," he said, voice crackling with artificial calm. "I was wondering when you'd get here." Jasmine froze. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to know. "We've been watching you," he continued. "Every step. Every upload. Every message. You've done well. Impressive even. But now it's time to end this." The lights shut off. An alarm blared. Footsteps. Guards. Jasmine grabbed Maya's hand and ran, weaving through the maze of glass chambers, looking for a way out. They turned corners blindly, heartbeats deafening, lungs burning. Then a stairwell. They raced up it 2 floors, burst through a door, and found themselves back in the upper lab. Red lights flashed. Voices shouted in the distance. Maya yanked open a fuse box and threw the breakers. Darkness swallowed the compound. Jasmine pulled a flare from her bag, lit it, and found the server room. There, on the central console, was a backup. A full digital map of everything. Every person. Every experiment. Every secret. She uploaded it to a portable drive. The guards were closing in. There was no more time. Jasmine turned to Maya. "Go." Maya shook her head. "No. Not without you." "I'll buy you a minute," Jasmine said. "You have the files. Get them out. The world needs to see." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. But she nodded. Then she ran. Jasmine turned back toward the hall, flare in one hand, the other gripping the pipe she'd pried from the wall. The first guard turned the corner. She swung. The flare cast wild shadows on the walls as Jasmine Crockett stood her ground, fighting not just for herself, but for every voice they had tried to silence. And somewhere in the darkness, another screen blinked on. Another indigo watching. But this one wasn't smiling. This one whispered only one word before it disappeared. "Finish." And Jasmine knew. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The echo of metal against flesh rang through the halls as Jasmine swung the pipe again, her body trembling with adrenaline, sweat mixing with blood on her brow. The guard crumpled at her feet, and for a moment silence returned, heavy and unnatural, like the compound itself was holding its breath. She could still hear Maya's footsteps in the distance, fading. She had made it to the surface. That was all that mattered now. Jasmine didn't expect to walk out. She never had. But if Maya escaped, if the truth got out, then everything they had done would mean something. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment spent questioning reality. Worth it. Jasmine turned the corner, Pipe raised again, only to find another figure waiting. But this one didn't move. He wasn't a guard. He wore a white coat, streaked with dust and time. His face was gaunt, unshaven. But his eyes were electric. "I've been waiting for you," he said. She paused, breathing hard, grip tightening on the pipe. "I don't have time for riddles." The man raised his hands slowly. "My name is Dr. Alden Varelli. I designed this facility. Project Delphi began with me, and now I'm ending it." Jasmine's knuckles went white. "You're ending it? After how many people you've buried in here?" He looked past her, at the chaos erupting down the hall. "You saw them, those in the chambers. Do you think I could live with that? With what I became? Then why are you still here?" "Because I was the only one who could shut it down. Until now. Until you." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. "Talk fast." Varelli walked past her slowly, toward the central console, where the emergency power grid flickered behind bulletproof glass. Delphi was never supposed to be what it became. It started as an AI ethics lab, monitoring the psychological impact of advanced machine learning. But we discovered something unexpected, something that let us predict human behavior with terrifying accuracy. We called it echo patterning, a neural mapping protocol that could model the choices of any person with a 97% certainty rate. Judges, CEOs, activists, anyone. But it required a neural sample. So Stratwin, they gave us people. Jasmine's stomach turned. That's what those chambers were. Yes. Organic processors. Living data. They weren't just prisoners, Jasmine. They were software. She looked at the blinking light above the console. A timer had started, some kind of internal lockdown. And what happens when the countdown hits 0? They burn the system. All of it. Data. Subjects. The whole compound. A full wipe. And Maya? She's gone. I disabled the outer sensors. They won't track her now. But you, he looked at her, eyes hollow, you have a choice. You can run. Or you can finish it. Jasmine stepped forward. I finish it. Varelli nodded, pulled a key from his coat, and inserted it into the terminal. A panel opened. Inside, 3 black levers, each labeled with a strange sequence of letters and numbers. Pull them in order, he said. That shuts down the mainframe. It disables the backup relay. It kills echo. Jasmine nodded, reaching for the first lever. Suddenly, gunfire. Varelli staggered. Blood bloomed across his chest as he fell back into the console. Jasmine dropped to the floor, crawling over to him. From the shadows, a slow clap echoed down the corridor. "Touching," said a voice. Cold. Female. Familiar. A woman stepped into the light. Tailored black suit. Sharp heels. Red lipstick like a slash across a porcelain face. Jasmine recognized her from the files. From the hearings. From the boardrooms she never had access to, but always heard about in whispers. Indigo. But not the indigo she'd faced in court. The real one. The one above it all. "I was hoping you'd make it," she said. "You've done marvelously, Jasmine. Honestly, I underestimated you. But you should have known, you can't kill a hydra by cutting off its tail." Jasmine looked down at Varelli. His eyes were glassy, breath shallow. She held his hand. And then he whispered something. So faint she barely heard it. 2 levers. Then bypass. She nodded, rose slowly, blood dripping from her fingertips. Indigo raised a pistol, aimed directly at her heart. "You're not leaving this place," she said. "But I'll make sure they never find your body." Jasmine didn't flinch. She took a slow step forward. "You know what scares people like you," she said. "The idea that someone you never saw coming might change the game. You think I'm small, replaceable. But guess what? I don't need to survive to win." Then she reached behind her, pulled a small device from her waistband. A detonator. Indigo's eyes widened. "You're bluffing." Jasmine smiled. "Am I?" Indigo fired. Jasmine dropped behind the console. The bullet shattered glass. But it was too late. She had already pulled the first lever. The lights flickered. The compound groaned. Alarm screamed. Indigo turned, running back down the corridor. Jasmine pulled the second lever, then opened the side panel Varelli had gestured to. wires, circuits, and beneath it a biometric override, a pad coded to his heartbeat. His body still pressed against it. The light turned green. The system went dark. And deep below, in the glass chambers, the lights inside each pod slowly dimmed. The subjects inside began to stir. Some cried. Some screamed. Some simply opened their eyes, confused, blinking into the harshness of life again. Jasmine sank to the floor, breathing ragged, staring up at the ceiling. She didn't know how much time she had, but it was enough. Outside, Maya crouched behind a dune, binoculars fixed on the compound. And then she saw it. Smoke rising. Not from destruction, but from change. The fence flickered and died. The backup generator popped. And people began to emerge. Dazed, broken, alive. She sprinted down the hill, tears blurring her vision. The drive was still in her bag. Everything was backed up. She had their story. She had Jasmine's story. And she would make the world listen. 3 days later, the headlines exploded. Secret government-backed facility uncovered in Mojave Desert. Whistleblower files reveal human experiments, behavioral mapping. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett missing, presumed dead after heroic exposure. And in every corner of the world, something shifted. Trust broke. Power recoiled. The invisible strings that held so many in silence began to snap. Laws were introduced. Protests erupted. Investigations opened. And through it all, a name rose again and again, whispered first, then shouted. Jasmine Crockett. Hero, rebel, martyr. But somewhere far from a noise, in a quiet coastal town, under a new name, and with a scar that ran from her shoulder to her collarbone, a woman walked through the fog. She wore no makeup. She spoke little. But when she smiled, it was a kind of smile that knew things others didn't. And sometimes, late at night, when she stood alone on the shore, her phone would buzz. A message. From Maya. From Devon's brother. From others. A network growing. A spark spreading. And every time, she responded with the same words. No more silence. Because Jasmine Crockett hadn't died in that facility. She had been reborn. And now, it was her turn to watch them, to hunt them, to bring the whole tower down, one secret at a time, until the last lie was buried in the open, where it could never hide again.